There is a plant growing along American roadsides right now that people are genuinely afraid of. It has bright red cones, a name that sounds like a warning label, and every single autumn, homeowners walk outside with a saw just to get rid of it. But nobody tells them the part that actually matters. That same plant makes a drink that tastes like fresh, squeezed lemonade. It is loaded with vitamin C. 400 years ago, the wealthiest gardeners in England paid real money just to grow it. Native nations were using it as food and medicine long before that. And the only reason anyone is scared of it today comes down to one thing: a case of mistaken identity that has lasted almost 4 centuries. Stick around, because by the end of this you will never look at this plant the same way again, and you will probably never look at a highway on ramp the same way either. And if stories like this are your thing, hit subscribe now, because there is a lot more of this coming. Every autumn, somewhere in this country, a homeowner walks into the backyard with a saw and destroys one of the most useful wild plants in North America. And they do it on purpose. A neighbor warned them. An internet article told them to. Or the name alone just sounded dangerous. The shrub they are killing grows tall clusters of deep red cones, packed together like a torch made of berries. And those cones taste like cold lemonade straight off the branch. Crushed and dried, they become the tart, ruby-colored spice that gives Middle Eastern cooking its signature tang. 400 years ago, wealthy English gardeners paid serious money to grow this exact American plant as a prized ornamental. It still grows wild for free across more than 30 states, lining highways, fence rows, and abandoned lots without anyone planting a single seed. So why do so many Americans look at it and reach for a chainsaw? The answer is one word: sumac, and a mix-up nearly 4 centuries in the making. Because the shrub being cut down is Staghorn Sumac, and almost everything most people believe about it is wrong. This story does not start with a chainsaw. It starts with a name that 2 very different plants were unlucky enough to share. Poison sumac is a real and genuinely dangerous plant. The rash it leaves behind can be worse than poison ivy, and in bad cases it can put someone in the emergency room. So the fear is not invented out of thin air. There is a real plan out there worth avoiding. But here is where the trouble begins. Poison sumac and Staghorn sumac are not the same plant. They are not even close relatives in any way that matters day to day. The only thing they truly share is half of a name. They do sit in the same broad plant family, the one botanists call Anacardiaceae. That family is a strange one. It also includes cashews, mangoes, and pistachios, 3 foods sitting in pantries and grocery stores across the country right now. It includes poison ivy too. So somewhere along the line, the logic became simple and simply wrong. Sumac sounds like poison sumac. Poison sumac is related to poison ivy. Therefore, all sumac must be trouble. Think about that logic for a second, because it is the same broken chain of reasoning that would make you throw out a bag of cashews because poison ivy happens to sit 2 branches over on the family tree. Nobody does that with cashews. But somehow, for one specific shrub, the fear stuck. And once a fear like that takes hold, it gets passed down like a family recipe, from a cautious parent to a cautious child, from one worried neighbor to the next, until nobody remembers where it started. It just becomes common knowledge. Except it was never true. Here is the detail almost everyone misses. Telling these 2 plants apart is not hard. It might be the easiest plant identification you will ever make in your entire life, and yet almost nobody bothers to learn it before reaching for a saw. Staghorn sumac holds its berries in tight, upright cones, deep crimson, pointed straight toward the sky like little torches lit at the tip of every branch. The young branches themselves are covered in soft fuzz, the exact same velvet texture you would feel running your hand along a deer's antler in early summer, which is precisely where the name staghorn comes from. In the fall, its long, feathery leaves turn a brilliant scarlet red you can spot from a moving car at highway speed. It favors dry, sunny, open ground, roadsides, field edges, old pastures, the bright, well-drained places that bake in full summer sun with barely any shade. Poison sumac does the exact opposite of all of that, in almost every category you could check. Its berries are white or pale gray-green, never red, and they hang down loose and drooping, never standing up toward the sky. Its stems are completely smooth with no fuzz at all, nothing like the soft velvet of its harmless cousin. And it will only grow with its feet wet in swamps, bogs, and standing water, places most people never even walk through. So if you are on dry land at the edge of a road, in a field, or along a fence line, you're almost certainly not looking at poison sumac at all, no matter what the name might suggest. The whole rule fits in a single breath. Red cones standing up on dry ground, safe. White berries drooping down in a swamp, leave it alone. That is the entire test, start to finish. Whole generations of homeowners cut down a harmless, useful shrub because nobody ever taught them the one detail that takes 10 seconds to learn and would have settled the question for good. Most people never heard this next part of the history, and it is arguably the most important part. Long before anyone feared this plant, the native people of this continent treasured it. Native nations from the Cherokee to the Ojibwe to the Iroquois used Staghorn Sumac as food and medicine for centuries, passing that knowledge down long before any settler ever set foot on the continent. They soaked the red cones in cool water to make a tart, rose-colored drink so close to lemonade that early settlers themselves called it Indian lemonade and drank it all through the brutal summer heat, long before refrigeration or store-bought drinks existed. Ethnobotanists who spent decades documenting how Native Americans used wild plants recorded Staghorn Sumac again and again, in use after use, from a cooling summer beverage to a wash for sore throats to a treatment folded into other remedies. And the tartness you taste in that drink is not just folklore, it is real, verifiable chemistry. The surface of each berry is coated in a fine layer of malic acid and ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid is vitamin C, the same nutrient people spend money on in tablet form today. Sailors and frontier families leaned on sour wild fruits exactly like this one to hold off scurvy when fresh food ran short on long journeys or hard winters. The dried cones kept their tang for months at a time, sealed away in a jar or a sack, which made them a quiet kind of insurance against a long, food-scarce winter, centuries before anyone understood the science behind why it worked. Now here is the irony that should sting a little, especially if you have ever cut one of these down yourself. While Americans were learning to fear it, an entire ocean away, Europeans were paying handsomely just to plant it. By the early 1600s, this exact American shrub was already a prized ornamental across the wealthy gardens of England, grown deliberately for its torch-like cones and its blazing, unmatched autumn color. Wealthy landowners who had never seen an American forest in their lives were paying for seeds and cuttings of a plant that, back home in America, grew wild and free along every dusty roadside. A century later, it was given a formal scientific name as botanists across Europe worked to properly classify and catalog plants being imported from the New World. The plant your neighbor wants to cut down today, without a second thought, was once considered a status symbol in the finest gardens of London. Somewhere between then and now, an ocean and a few centuries apart, the exact same plant went from prized import to backyard nuisance, and nothing about the plant itself ever changed. Only the story people told about it changed. And those red cones do far more than make a summer drink. This is where the story leaves the backyard entirely and lands squarely on your dinner plate. If you have ever eaten Za'atar, that earthy, tangy spice blend dusted over warm flatbread, hummus, and roasted vegetables all across the Middle East, then you have already tasted sumac, whether you realized it or not. The bright, lemony note running through that blend comes from dried, ground sumac berries, not from any actual lemon. The spice you buy in a jar at the store usually comes from a Mediterranean cousin sitting in the very same genus as the American shrub. But the Staghorn Sumac growing wild along the American roadside carries that exact same sharp, tart flavor, sitting there for free while people drive right past it. Cooks and chefs dust the deep red powder over hummus, over grilled meats fresh off the fire, over rice and roasted vegetables, both for the tang it adds and for the gorgeous, deep red color it leaves behind on the plate. So picture this scene for a second. People drive to the grocery store and pay a premium price for a small imported jar of ground sumac, while the exact same flavor sits completely ignored on the shrub they have been trying to bulldoze out of their own yard for years. On top of all that, it happens to be one of the more antioxidant-rich spices sitting on that shelf, which is a large part of why the rest of the world never stopped using it, even as it fell out of favor here. For most of American history, none of this was a secret, and none of it was considered special in any way. It was simply ordinary, everyday knowledge that got lost over time. Staghorn Sumac was the plain, unremarkable shrub sitting at the edge of the field, the one nobody thought twice about. Its bark and leaves are heavy with tannins, and tanners once relied on those tannins to cure leather, while dyers used the same plant to help set color permanently into cloth, making it a working part of daily life and local industry rather than a curiosity. Nobody wrote songs about it or put it on a postage stamp. It was just there, useful, reliable, standing quietly at the corner of every dry lot and fence line in the country, doing its job without asking for any credit. And maybe that is exactly how a plant slips out of memory. Not with a government ban and not with a dramatic scandal, but with a slow, collective shrug repeated across generations. One generation stops using it, the next generation stops recognizing it, and the generation after that only remembers the scary half of its name. Piece by piece, until all that survives is the fear, and the usefulness is the part that gets forgotten first. So let's bring it all the way home, because making that famous lemonade is genuinely simple, and you can do it yourself the very next time you see this plant. You want the deep red cones from late summer into early fall, right when they are fully ripe and packed with flavor. And you want to pick them specifically on a dry day, because a hard rain washes away the tart, powdery coating on the outside of each berry that holds almost all of the flavor. Snap off a few cones, break them apart with your hands into a jar of cool or room temperature water. No need for anything fancy. Let them soak for 10 to 20 minutes, and you will watch the water slowly blush into a deep, rosy pink right in front of you. Then strain the liquid through a coffee filter or a clean cloth, which catches the fine little hairs covering the berries, and sweeten the finished drink however you like it. One piece of advice matters more than any other here, and it is worth repeating. Use cool water, never boiling water. Hot water drags the bitter tannins straight out of the plant and turns your bright, clean lemonade harsh and mouth-puckering instead of refreshing. Cold steeping keeps the flavor clean and tart, the exact same way native families made it for generations before anyone wrote the process down. And if you dry those same cones and grind them into a powder, you have just made your own jar of that expensive imported spice for absolutely nothing. Take only what you personally need for your jar, and leave plenty of cones behind for the birds that lean on them as a food source straight through the winter months. So go back, one more time, to that homeowner standing there with the saw. The plant they were about to destroy makes a free summer drink rich in vitamin C. It carries the exact same flavor people pay good money for in a small imported jar at the store. And it once stood proud in the finest, most expensive gardens of Europe. The only thing that was ever truly wrong with it, from the very beginning, was a name it never chose for itself. This season, when the leaves begin to turn and you spot those brilliant red cones standing tall along a dry roadside, you will know exactly what you are looking at. Not a threat, not something to fear or cut down. A glass of lemonade that has been waiting quietly on the branch the whole time, for anyone willing to look a little closer. If this changed how you see the wild plants growing around you, hit subscribe and stay close, because there is a whole continent of forgotten plants still out there, hiding in plain sight, and the next one will be waiting for you right here.